Welcome to CFAM's Incoming Med Student M0 workshop. And first and foremost, congratulations to all of you for getting into medical school. That's such an exciting time. And I'm hoping, for all of us in our development committee, we can share some tips and advice to kind of help you transition and start thinking about preparing for med school. Um, and just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Jaira. I'm part of the CFAM Development Committee as one of the co-chairs, and I'm a current first year medical student. And then, Kat, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm also part of the CFAM Development Committee and I'm a third year med student. Popcorn Misha.
Hi guys, Misha. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the development committee, and I'm also a third year medical student.
All right, and then we have some of our development committee members here, Saskia, Gabby, and Sophia, who aren't able to make it, but helped us with our workshop. So let's just go ahead and get started. For today's agenda, there's kind of a dense set of topics, but y'all will have the slides for reference. I know the first one is talking about finances. I think many of us had questions about that, so we'll spend some time on it. Then studying, things like researching, connecting with faculty or networking, then finding balance in med school. In the next slide and then more about health and wellness, things about moving essentials, so more practical tips as you prepare for wherever you're going to go for med school. And then we'll end the session with some Q&As. So you're welcome to put any questions that you have in the chat, but we'll most likely answer them towards the end of the presentation so that we can have as much time to answer any questions. All right, so first thing is finances. Again, many people had questions about finances, financial aid. So I hope to kind of give you all some big picture information to hopefully answer some of the questions that you have. All right, so firstly, thinking about financial aid, one thing I wanted to talk about very briefly is the difference between tuition and fees versus cost of attendance. This is like in college, like tuition and fees, think of it as the money that you're paying to attend classes and to register as a student, whereas cost of attendance is literally everything else that you have to pay for in order to attend school. So things like rent, transportation, books, other registration fees. So this is language that you might see either through scholarships that you might receive in medical school. They might say your tuition fees are covered by this merit scholarship that you receive, or other scholarships might say it's covering your full cost of attendance. So just know that there's a difference between those two terms. Tuition and fees is always a part of cost of attendance, is the way that I think about it. And when you're budgeting, as we'll talk about later, you also want to think about cost of attendance instead of just tuition and fees. And then since we're past the point where you probably have already narrowed down which school you're going to go to, um, you probably have been told by the financial aid office to start filing your FAFSA. But in case you haven't, you still have to file FAFSA every single year. The process is supposed to be much quicker than probably when you did it during undergrad. More likely than not, most of you might be considered as independent, so the form is super short. But just remember to file this, I think, every March 2nd every year so that you can continue having access to your federal loans. And then, if you haven't yet, I really recommend connecting with your financial aid counselor early on. I don't know how many of you have already done so, but if not, this is a perfect time for you to just touch base with who your assigned financial aid staff is going to be. Ask them any questions that you have and just establish that relationship because they are your go-to person for anything financial aid related. So if you have questions about like disbursements, loans, how to kind of manage the loan portal, things of that nature, they would be your go-to person. And then some things for me that were very helpful to know early on would be your disbursement schedule. I don't know if it's different for you, Misha and Kat, but for me, mine is like August, December, and June. That's just how they break up their disbursement schedule. So this is helpful because when you borrow money, my understanding is like you can only get the max amount per disbursement schedule. So for me, like this helps me know, like basically when I get the sum of money, like either through loans or scholarships or a mixture of both, like how long am I supposed to make that money stretch for? So this is very helpful to know. Usually this information is also on your school's website. And then I think the big conversation here is about how loans will be kind of different for your upcoming year versus prior years. So I really recommend touching base with them early because you want to know what type of loan options are available to you, or if they've given you a preliminary award letter. So this, it's basically a document that outlines like what they anticipate to be able to give you, but it's not like the final list usually. Um, that will list the different loans as well that the school is able to offer you based on what you're qualified for. I think it's just a good idea to connect with the financial aid person to understand, okay, what's the difference between the Stafford loan versus the Grad Plus loan? Like, how can I borrow for both? Or like, how should I strategize if I don't think I'll borrow the full amount? Um, I think the new changes that are coming would be with the new recent bill that was signed. It changes the amount of loans that a lot of graduate professional students are able to borrow. So now there is, I believe, a max of $200,000 for your entire program duration and an annual cap of $50,000 per year. So this is again like very important for you to talk about with your institution to see how they will help you manage that and how they kind of arrange that for their students. And then it might be helpful to also ask about loans for disadvantaged students. There's specific criteria that have to be met in order to qualify for this, but I believe it gives you a more favorable interest rate when you're borrowing for loans. And then, of course, internal and external scholarship opportunities. Every medical school will curate their own list of internal scholarships that most students in their institution will qualify for, either because of the partners that they have, donors, or even geographic qualifications for different scholarships. So definitely look into that as well. Kind of scope out like which ones are just for first years, which ones are for second years. There are different scholarship opportunities that start actually or only like third years or fourth years are qualified for. So it's a good idea to kind of look at these just to kind of skim and see the general requirements that these scholarship opportunities have. Some of them, or I think most of them you can apply to on your own, but some of them are nominations based, for example. So I think that just kind of gives you a flavor for how you might want to strategize if you're interested in applying for these scholarships. And then, if possible, try to map out what your scholarships and loans will look like for your entire programs, just so you can kind of budget. This is something that I did before I started medical school, and it's always helpful to me to kind of estimate like how much loans am I like taking out for the duration of the program? If you get new scholarships, how will that adjust your budgeting for the rest of the year? I'll give you guys an example at the end of this section as well. And then, of course, like important to share, but there are full tuition scholarship options. The more common ones that you'll hear would be military scholarships and then National Health Service Corps. I believe if you're interested in primary care and willing to serve in underserved areas, this program will help cover your tuition and fees, I believe, plus some stipend. And in exchange for your like service to a designated medically underserved area once you're done with training. And then depending on where you go to medical school, I know some of y'all might be going out of state. Kat and I are in California, Misha's in Arizona. There might be state-specific options where your particular state may help pay for your loans either while you're in training, aka in medical school, or even in residency or for attendings who are like serving in specific geographic areas. So for example, in California, if you're already practicing as a physician, there's an option where I believe, or a program where the state will pay you back if you like stay in a medically underserved area and work there for several years. So those are also helpful things to keep in mind. They might be not current, but might be options for you in the future, depending on what you want to go to. And then if you over borrowed, so let's say like, you borrowed a sum of money for a particular disbursement schedule, talk to your financial aid staff what the process is like to return the loan money and what returning that loan money will mean to you. So for example, for some students, if you borrowed and then return it within a specific number of a specific amount of time, like let's say 3 months, you can return that money and you won't accrue any interest on the amount that you're returning. So that's also helpful to know in case you borrowed more than you anticipated for that specific amount of time. And then some things that a lot of people do would be considering putting your loans in a high yield savings account. It just helps it grow a little bit more. And instead of like keeping that entire sum of money in your checking account. This is helpful for me because I feel like if I see just a crazy amount of money in my bank account, it's hard for me to compartmentalize like how much I'm supposed to have every month. So I put it in a different account and I just like take what I need every month. So that also helps me keep responsible about the amount of money that I'm borrowing and how I'm using it. So these are some options that people have used in the past. And then, depending again on where you are, this might not be called the same thing, but many medical students qualify for SNAP or EBT, so CalFresh if you're in California, and then Medi-Cal, which is kind of the state health insurance. So because you will be in school, you're not making any income, most students actually use these programs and health insurance to kind of save some money as well. Because of course, like in college, you have to have health insurance and your school will provide you that option, but it might not be cost effective. So a lot of students opt for these as well, which I didn't know about until I started med school. Okay. And then again, as I mentioned, I just highly recommend creating a 4-year budget spreadsheet. However, that works for you if you're like an Excel girly or you like to do things on paper. Just have a big picture view of what your entire med school cost will be like. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think it gives you a really good sense of what you're working with financially. And then when budgeting, I think it would be helpful to account for, of course, rent and utilities. So right about now, you might start looking for where you're going to rent. Are you going to use grad housing? How long are you going to be in grad housing for? And if not, what are the average rents for, the area that you're living in? And then this will be important. We'll talk a lot about this, but third-party subscriptions, they can be pretty pricey depending on what type of third-party material you want to use. So I recommend also looking for class discounts, but definitely keep this in mind because more than likely you will end up paying for at least one of them. And then travel, if you want to do conferences or you're driving, you have to pay for a lot of parking fees, like when you're just parking at like the school parking lot. So take that into account as well. Any ride share, gas, especially nowadays, keep that in mind. And then of course, fun money, like just, give yourself a specific budget every week to have fun, get that takeout, hang out with your friends. And then app subscriptions, so things like your Amazon Prime or your Spotify, Apple TV. Those things can add up as well. So it's helpful to see where your money is going. And then, as I mentioned, also insurance, anything that you have to pay for. So health insurance would be a part of that. Usually, if you have the school health insurance, it's part of like the tuition and fees or cost of attendance that you pay the school at the beginning of every disbursement schedule. If you have your own car, then pay for your car insurance. Things of that nature. I think that might be it. So, just to kind of wrap this up as well, this is an example for my institution, what off-campus or university housing cost of attendance looks like. So I recommend looking this up for your school just to kind of see how they break down tuition and fees and other, items that they put into account when they're calculating their total cost of attendance because your school will give you loans up until the cost of attendance. So they won't, for instance, for your first year, your school will not offer you loans up to 120K because the total is only 99,000. So that's also important to keep in mind when you're budgeting. And then this is what my sample finance spreadsheet is. All of these numbers for the scholarships are made up numbers. But this is kind of how I try to think about what my budget for the year will look like. I know it's kind of cut off at the end, but I basically spread it between like what scholarships am I getting? If I have CalFresh and Medi-Cal, like how much will that save me? And then I made a list of what I estimated my costs will be for a specific year. And in the previous slide, they separated summer with the actual academic year, so I just combined the two. So it's a pretty daunting spreadsheet. It stressed me out when I made it, but I reference it every now and then, especially when I'm taking into account like, am I going to return money that I overborrowed? Again, it just helps me kind of keep on track with the budget that I had set for myself at the beginning of first year. All right. So I know that was dense, but we'll power through. For studying, I know y'all had a lot of questions about this as well. And for the next 4 years and more, we will all be doing some flavor of studying regularly. So for this next slide, I wanted to just introduce you all to some common terminology. Y'all might have already listened to some or heard some of these, but this is language that you will be very familiar with once you start med school. So first, like in-house, like when people say, "Oh my gosh, like are your exams like in-house or NBME style?" In-house just refers to any learning material that's produced by your institution. So most of the time, like your lectures, your active learning classes, they will all be in-house materials. And then I mentioned earlier third party. So third party, think of them like your Kaplan or like your Princeton review when you were studying for the MCAT. They're learning material that's produced by, external companies to kind of help you pass your USMLE or STEP exams, so your board exams. So examples of the common ones that you'll hear would be things like UWorld, AMBOSS, Bootcamp, all of these things. They might just be words to you right now, but I promise you, you'll be very familiar with them in like the next 3 months. Basically, these are all just different study resources that people use. Obviously, you don't need to get every single one of them. And then people will also talk about the NBME, not as common for first year, but you will start hearing it more until I think when you start rotations, like your second and third year. But the NBME are basically the group of people that write the board exams. So they usually talk about it in reference to STEP. And then we have USMLE, STEP, COMLEX. That's the name of the board exams that we all have to take. We take two during medical school and then, more after after that. I just think of it as like the MCAT of med school. We have to do well in these board exams. We have to pass them in order to move on to the next stage. There are scores that are taken into account when you apply for residency. And then people will talk about, is that high yield? Like whatever you're studying, is that high yield? Do I have to think about it? High yield just means, you probably heard this in the context of the MCAT. Are these topics that come up regularly in exams, either for your in-house exams or STEP or COMLEX exams? So high yield, just synonymous to, is this really important information that I see every time that I get tested? And then Anki, I feel like most people have heard of Anki at this point, but most people love Anki. It's a spaced repetition flashcard app. I guarantee you, like your school will probably have a workshop talking to you about how to use Anki. And I recommend going to it just, so you get familiar with the things that people use. And then Anki is like a comprehensive Anki deck for STEP and complex exams. And it's cross-referenced with a lot of third-party materials, so a lot of people like using it. So, just so when you start hearing these things, hopefully they start sounding a little bit familiar. But again, people will talk about them all the time.
So now I'll talk a little bit about studying materials. If you like to take lecture notes slash go to lecture, these are some things I debated about when coming to med school. I personally like to write, and that's kind of how I learn. So some some people had a classic pen and paper. I used to do that in undergrad, but I actually don't do that anymore. But I'll go through some options before I tell you what I use. If you haven't heard of Notion, it's basically this, I guess, like resource where you can include like type notes and stuff like that, and it's very organized and you can make it look cute. And it's also free, which is very nice, and it's easy to store like all of your classes notes that way. Um, I personally use Microsoft OneNote, which is also free. You can have handwritten things and annotate slides, because you can upload PDFs and things like that. It is less user friendly though, however, compared to like other like handwritten type note apps. But it's more compatible with Windows, and I'm personally like a Windows laptop user, so I ended up going with OneNote since it's free and more compatible with Windows. These next two subscriptions, I have a lot of friends that use Good Notes and Notability. From my understanding, they're both great for handwritten notes. You can annotate slides. They're very user friendly, compatible with Apple products. Notability, though, I believe has this cool feature where you can like integrate audio. And I think it may transcribe as well, perhaps. So that's I yeah, I heard it doesn't work well all the time, but I think that's a really cool feature that they specifically have. And there's of course like other options like Google Docs, for example, and things like that. But just wanted to include these if you haven't heard about them. And then this is the biggest question that I had going into med school. Is an iPad or a tablet really necessary? I personally think it depends on your learning style. For me personally, I do like to like write and annotate things just to like understand it a little bit better and have it like really sink in my brain. So I personally bought a used iPad that was like much cheaper before starting med school. For my preclinical curriculum, we were like doing a lot of like lecture based type of learning, and that helped me a lot. I will say other people besides like writing stuff down and taking notes, like also like to draw out concepts or flowcharts on whiteboards. My roommate like literally bought a full-sized whiteboard that is in our apartment. Um, and some people have those smaller ones or go to campus to write on the whiteboards. Other people like to have like physical books or PDFs and like read textbooks. And other people like to do flashcards, like whether it's on Anki or like actually write them down on handwritten flashcards. And some folks may already be using AI tools. A lot of med students and a lot of med students like also don't. But here's a couple like AI like softwares that you could consider using. I personally, since I'm taking some shelf exams right now, I'll ask like for example ChatGPT or Claude to give me like practice questions on a topic that I'm not really understanding that well, or to explain a topic in a more simple way to me. So that's an example of you could use how you can use it, integrate AI into your learning. However, please don't like copy paste your assignments into AI or else you will get in trouble, obviously. But it's a good like addition. Yes, and always fact check AI because I have also experienced in my shelf exam studying that they're not always right. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're just gonna talk about studying as a whole in general, just to like kind of give you guys some tips and tricks about how to deal with the massive amount of information you guys will undoubtedly, have in medical school. So first thing is just breathe. You'll be fine. A lot of people have gone through it. You'll get through it. You'll be fine as well. I know there was also a question by someone about, oh, I've had a lot of gap years. I haven't been in the classroom in so long. Like, how is that going to be? I can say from personal experience, I also had a lot of gap years. You'll be fine. You won't be behind in any way whatsoever. Med school is a whole different ball game. So if you're prepared, you're ready, they'll be fine for you as well. Um, Whenever I give like people advice about how to study, it's always kind of a struggle because I always see studying as a very personal thing. It's not about like, oh, like this is how I study, this is how you should study as well. I don't think that works because how I learn and how I study might be different from how you learn and how you study. So it's really all about finding what works for you. But these are kind of like some points that I feel like everyone should know about. And the first is to connect with your school's academic support office. Try to do this early. And at least from like my experience, they're very open and they have a lot of things to share with students about things like learning strategies, study schedules, and relevant academic resources. So I would say they're your first go-to with like, how do I study for med school? They're the ones who are the experts at this. They've guided a lot of students before through academics, and they can also help you as well. Um, they also might have tutoring available if you need it. We also have, for example, for our school, we have peer learning where you can also go to your classmates for help, things like that. And lastly, I would just highly recommend meeting with them, even if you think you might not need it. It's always helpful to have that connection established before you need it, so that if ever you do need it in the future, you already have that relationship with them. Next, and this is like another personal thing, I would suggest use whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong way to study. So like I was saying, it's not that, oh, like my classmate studies Anki, he's on Anki like 10 hours a day. I should do that too because he gets good grades. No, dude, like if it doesn't work for you, it's not gonna work for you. And I would actually say there is a wrong way to study, and that's studying the way it doesn't work for you. So a lot of it is going to be trial and error. And I would say your first maybe month, 2 months of med school, up to your first test, your first exam, is going to be a lot of trial and error, trying different ways of studying and seeing what works for you. And you can use that first exam as your benchmark. Like, okay, I tried this way of studying. This is how I did. What can I change with the next exams moving forward, you know, to do better next time? And you'll find like as you go through med school, as you start absorbing more information, and as you start taking more exams, you'll find what works for you. Yeah, like I was saying, you can always try new things. I always say try something before you knock it. Um, and also, if it sounds stupid but it works, it's not stupid. And this is also something I always say. I always have like stupid mnemonics in my mind, but at the end of the day, it sticks. You don't have to explain it to anyone. Like if there's a way for you to understand it and it doesn't make sense to anyone else, it doesn't matter because you don't have to explain why it works for you. You just have to remember something. If it works for you, it works for you. And then this last point is kind of for so I had this mentor. This is this learning recipe for how to learn complex material, such as what you'll be learning in med school. Um, and I like it because it kind of is a catch-all for everything. He didn't give us like, you have to do it like this. You can do it however you want it, but you need these three things to learn complex material. You need to do something. You need to give yourself multiple opportunities over time, different ways. So multiple opportunities, you need repetition. I don't care how you repeat it, you just need to repeat it. If you want Anki, sure. Anki is in by nature a repetition thing, right? If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, find something else. But you need to give yourself multiple passes at the material. You need to do it over time. You can't cram in med school. I'm sorry, if it worked for you in undergrad, it's not going to work for you now. You need to be studying over like a long period of time. And like the key thing for me is different ways. So if you have like a favorite way of learning, let's say you're an Anki girly, find something else that's not repetition, that's not Anki. It could be you learn through videos, it could be question sets, it could be diagramming things out on a whiteboard. But the fact there's two different ways by which you parse through the material creates a stronger connection. So it's not just like, oh, I forgot the Anki card, I don't know it anymore. Oh, it can be, I forgot the Anki card, but I learned it through another way, and that is the stronger connection by which I can remember it. So if you have those three things, and I don't care how you get those three things, you'll be okay. Okay, and I think that's it for studying.
So next, I'm going to talk about research and like getting connected with faculty in terms of like shadowing and mentorship. So first, in terms of research, this is like I'm gonna give you like general ways that you can approach it, and I'm sure that your schools or like upperclassmen that you'll meet will probably give you like more specific tips that are more institution specific. So first, in terms of research, it's helpful to like define the actual area of interest that you have and the type of research that you'd like to do. That way you can be like more targeted in terms of like the potential mentors that you're looking for step two. So when you're making a list, what you can do is you can include faculty that you've actually met through like various events or like have heard of from other people. You can look at department websites, you can ask advisors, you can have like there's probably some faculty that are more involved in your school of medicine or in mentorship capacities, so you could look into that as well. And you also want, if possible, to assess their mentorship qualities. Like in terms of like being a researcher, in terms of their publications and grants, if that information is available, as well as like actual like research mentors. So how is their availability? How is their reputation as a mentor if you ask former mentees? And then you definitely want to reach out and arrange for a meeting. And at that meeting, you want to discuss your interests, background, like timeline, and of course, your capacity. So you don't want to overpromise and then underdeliver, obviously. You want to be very transparent from the get-go. And you also want to be prepared. So familiarizing yourself with the work that they do, asking how you can be involved in potential projects if you're interested. Um, and I feel like once you're in medical school, you'll see this shortly if you want to be involved in research and other opportunities, but I feel like the opportunities are kind of endless. So I feel like it's very important for you to choose and commit, whether that be to one or multiple, provided you have the capacity. Like, so I will say, like, just be mindful of that and not overcommitting to folks and then unfortunately having to burn a bridge because you don't have the capacity to keep up with that many projects. Now, in terms of shadowing and mentorship, it's kind of the same deal. First, you want to identify specialties that you're interested in. And I didn't put this here on the slide, but I believe like double AMC also has like some sort of quiz that you can do to like match you on like what specialty are you interested in? Kind of like one of those like BuzzFeed quizzes, but it's more official because it's double AMC. So how you can find some people, you could like again through like faculty that you've met or heard of, department websites again, like networking events, mentorship events, things like that. Then you want to reach out with multiple times and dates that you're available just because like physicians are busy no matter if they're resident, fellow, or attending. You just want to give them like multiple dates so that you don't have to, you could reduce like the back and forth. Um, but also most of the action is usually in the AM. So if you're giving them a lot of like PM availability, just know that you might not like have as fruitful of an shadowing experience. And now in terms of mentorship, you could first assess that by scoping out if that they actually have the capacity to mentor you. And you also want to like kind of identify the area that you want to be mentored in. So like, are you interested in like learning more about a specialty? Are you interested in research, exploring careers, a life mentor, like someone to just like talk to that's kind of like harder to get. But if the vibe is right, you can have a life mentor. And to like kind of like build this rapport, you can ask for coffee chats or informational kind of like Zooms to chat until you feel more comfortable to formally ask for mentorship if again the vibe is right. So that was a speed run. And now I think Misha is going to talk about finding a balance, or perhaps Jai.
Perhaps
I
Chai.
think that's me. Okay. A lot of this is more, I think the heart-to-heart talk that you'll have with people. Like when you go to your orientation, your first month of med school is just kind of getting oriented. You'll hear a lot of the same things that we're telling you now, and the upperclassmen will probably tell you a lot about finding a balance. And I think that's just because med school is such a long journey, and there's so much that is already expected of you in terms of, performing well academically, performing well in a lot of different areas of your professional life. It's very easy for medicine to kind of creep, up in your life and have that be like the focal point of everything that you're doing. So I think it's very important to give yourself space to take time for yourself and nurture other things that you're interested in outside of medicine. So that's really the essence of this section. Um, it might be, this is a bit of a mindset shift. I think the pre-med grind is all about like, okay, I need to do so many things at once to get into med school. But once you're in med school, practically everyone around you, like other classmates, faculty, staff, the attendings residents that you'll meet, everyone understands that you are a student first. So it's totally okay to give yourself time to adjust to the rigor of med school, especially if you're kind of transitioning off of a gap year. Take that first block or two to just mainly study. If you feel like you're really needing all that time to just adjust to how much you have to study, that is totally okay. Like there is no rush to do everything all at once within like your first 2 months of med school because you have it feels like not a lot of time, but in the grand scheme of things for your preclinical years, taking a month or two to focus on studying is going to do you much better than doing everything at once and then burning out very early on. The advice that I give to people, even in undergrad, is to add involvements one by one. And this is kind of dependent on the timeline for like getting into different leadership opportunities, of course. But if you could help it, add things to your plate one by one. So Kat said, right, like, scope out what research project you want to do, but don't say yes to three all at once, even if they all sound cool. Like there are so many things, so many cool doors that open for you in med school, but you can't do all of them at once. It is normal, it is common for you to maybe not go with something that is super cool, but the time is not right. And that's just because you really just have to prioritize doing well in school academically, but also doing well in your personal life. So, if you have a research project and you want to go into a more competitive specialty, sure, prioritize that, add that to your plate, see how that works for you for a couple weeks, for a month, because sometimes they might say this only takes 5 hours per week, but then you realize it actually takes 10, outside of the requirements that you have. So it kind of helps you adjust to things little by little. And then, of course, connect and network with your upperclassmen to kind of learn the ins and outs of your program. They have just been in the shoes that you're coming in to fill. So they will be helpful in like kind of strategizing like when to have leadership positions. So for instance, like if you look at the clubs when you go to orientation, are most of the student leaders first years? Are most of them third years? That kind of gives you a sense for like when you can also do those things when you get to it. And then, of course, make time for things that fill your cup. So, passion projects, sports, hobbies. If you like to host friends for like dinner parties, do that still. Like, you can do that to like, build your friendships with your classmates. And I think for me, the favorite advice that I got from an upperclassman is to schedule things to look forward to throughout the week. Sometimes your class is just so like heavy for 1 or 2 days. So I try to schedule like tennis in the evening on Wednesday evenings or like a movie to look forward to Friday evenings, just so I have like a fun thing that kind of waits for me at the end of all the craziness that you might have to go through throughout the day. And then, of course, make time for your non-negotiables like exercising, going to get coffee on the weekends, whatever helps you feel re-energized. Next slide. And this is just, we won't stay on this slide for too long, but this is just like some of the things that we like to do kind of outside of like just studying in med school. So of course, I think a lot of people think like you just like study all the time in med school and you have no life. Like I don't think it's realistic to just study all the time. It's a great time to enjoy life as well while being a student. And then, really quickly, again, orientation is probably the best time to meet a lot of your classmates, but that's not to say like you won't meet people afterwards. It's just like the time when everyone's new, everyone's like very excited to meet new people. So I recommend joining clubs, affinity groups, student interest groups, whatever club you have on campus. It's a great way to meet people with similar interests, whether that's like a specialty interest or like hobbies. You can have a club for practically anything in grad school. And then I highly recommend as well, like joining any of these like support networks or mentorship programs early on. So there's usually like a big SIB, little SIB program, or like Kat said, like doing a coffee chat with people would be helpful as well. And then, of course, like you don't just have to join things within your med school. If you're connected to the local area, that would be a great time to also continue fostering that relationship with organizations outside of school.
Okay, really quick, we'll go through like the rest of the presentation. So just for health and wellness, yes, we are first and foremost students, but we're also first and foremost people. Please, please, please take care of yourself. Figure out your health appointments before things get crazy. So that means now, and it's actually very helpful because you will need a lot of stuff for onboarding as well. You're gonna need immunizations, you're gonna need tests and all of that. So it's very helpful to get those in order now. Schedule your appointments early because you will need it for onboarding to your schools. And then lastly, just take time if you need it. Med school will always be here when you come back, but you know, prioritize your health, prioritize your mental health, physical health, and all of that. Everything else comes second to taking care of yourself. And four things that I want you guys to do more, but if you can, eat, sleep, rest, and move. We'll talk more about food later if you have time, maybe, I don't know. But please, please, please eat. It is very easy to not eat and just do things because you're very busy. But I don't care what you eat. Eat unhealthy if you want to, but please eat. And also, please sleep. We will have so much time. A resident once told me you'll have so much time in residency to not sleep. So sleep now when you can. Next, rot if you must. I also love a good rot, but try to have things that recharge you as well, whatever that may be. Find something you like that's also sustainable. And then for like moving, most schools either have a gym on site or at the very least student discounts. Do whatever you want to do. Just move because it's very easy to just also sit down on at your desk and just be studying all the time. It's a very easy trap to fall into because you feel like you have to study all the time. But I promise you that it will also help your studying if you move as well. Walk, use the stairs, small things. Next, cut. Guard your mental health of your life. Med school is very hard. It will try you and challenge you in ways you did not think you would be tried and challenged, but it's also a very fulfilling experience. Reach out for help when you need it, please. There are people around you. You can reach out to us if you want. You can reach out to friends, family, but please reach out for help when you do need it. Most schools have either like free therapy through the school or at the very least, once again, resources you can turn to. Please don't be afraid to use resources. Um, please don't be afraid to think that like, oh, like it might be something that schools will look into if I have like problems with my mental health. I promise you it's something that one, you should not be thinking about, should prioritize your health, and two, like it'll be fine. And then lastly, just a point on accommodations, because this is a thing that a lot of students go into med school not really knowing much about. These are things that are very helpful for exams, and it can be either in-house or the USMLE exams as well. From experience, we've found that schools are they're more lenient on the in-house, like they're more accepting about like giving you accommodations. It's very hard for the USMLE because I don't know, dude. Like it's the USMLE, they have standards. But just two things to keep in mind from the outset about this. Start early. So start reaching out to your learning specialist, start documenting things early if you think you might need accommodations. And reach out to your school's offices early, whether it be your DRC, which is a disability resource center, or the learning specialist, and they can help you. But yeah, feel like if anyone has more questions about accommodations, feel free to reach out at the end. Yeah. Next, so just very quickly on moving essentials. If you're moving from state to state, like I did, Facebook Marketplace is a lot of like good things you can find. I mean, I think the same as undergrad, like where we found our furniture or like uh the school we're going to, a lot of like the fourth years are moving and don't want to lug around like furniture back to where they're coming from. So just try to ask them as well. Um, yeah. Essentials are very personal, I think. Like if you're going to a place where public transportation is great, I don't think you need a car. That's good for you. But if you're like in a place where you need a car, you need a car. It'll depend on where you're going, really. At the end of the day, if you have internet and a laptop, I think you'll be fine. Those are my essentials for med school. Eating in med school, it's very hard. Try to meal prep if you can. That's Kat's meal prep. He's a meal prep god. Um, some events in school have food. My personal rule is if an event does not have food and it's not required, I'm not going to it. But if there's food, I will 100% go to it. And then you can also have prepared meals like, I don't know, spam if you want. And I think that's all we have. Thank you once again to everyone for coming today and being part of this workshop. If you guys want to look us up or have any more questions or want to learn more about CFAM, you can also check out our website. It's cfam.org or follow us on social medias. We're at the CFAM org as well. Thank you.